I walked into my boss's office to ask for a raise. But he laughed in my face and showed me the door. I'm not a marketing genius, a natural-born entrepreneur, a trust fund baby, or even a particularly intelligent individual. In fact, just a few short years ago, I was one of those lifeless, brainwashed 9-5-ers you see in the subway. The crazy thing is, I had done everything right. I went to a prestigious college, found a good job in the big city, put my head down and worked hard for years. But, for some reason, I just couldn't catch a break. It felt like no matter what I did, no matter how many hoops I jumped through, or targets I exceeded, the needle wasn't moving. On paper, I was living a good life, working in a solid job for a reasonable paycheck. But in reality, I was hating every second of my life. And the worst part is, even though I was working hard and making my company a lot of money, I didn't get any recognition, let alone a raise. In fact, after I paid my rent, bills, the crazy gas prices, and put food on the table, I had barely anything left. At one point, it got so bad. I wanted to propose to my girlfriend, but I couldn't afford a ring. Can you imagine how powerless I felt, being unable to do the one thing I felt I was supposed to be able to do? It was so embarrassing. I was ready to do whatever it takes to make an extra couple grand. So I decided to do something desperate. I resorted to being a human test subject. Or, in plain English, a human guinea pig. I would literally go into a laboratory, choke down a bunch of untested and potentially dangerous medicines, and get paid for it. Needless to say, it wasn't worth it. I was throwing up all the time, feeling poisoned by all of these experimental medicines. And I couldn't tell my family or friends about it, or ask for help, because I was too embarrassed to admit what I was doing. This was the absolute lowest point in my life. I was trading my health and well-being for a few measly bucks. And I still barely made enough to cover all my expenses and survive another month. It was the final straw for me. Something had to change. I knew I deserved more, so I went into my boss's office to ask for a raise. I had worked too hard for too long to be risking my health for money. Plus, I calculated that I'd helped the company a lot since I'd been there. So, in my mind, the raise was a logical next step. I wrote down my pitch, prepared answers for every question he could possibly ask, and walked into my boss Mr. Glickstein's office ready to take what's mine. You know, boss, I started. I've been thinking about this for a long time and I'd like to discuss a raise. Mr. Glickstein looked me straight in the eyes, with the most disrespectful smirk on his face, and calmly replied, "Oh, or else what?" Mr. Glickstein replied this way because he knew that I had no other option, and that he could easily tell me no and I'd have to keep working for him, at this pay, anyway. It was at that moment that I realized that I was never going to get paid what I was worth. I was on my way towards spending my entire life working for people like Mr. Glickstein. And the very thought of being treated like this for another 30-40 years made my stomach turn. Granted, I was scared to quit because this paycheck was the only stability I had in my life. But, at the same time, I knew so many people who eventually made their peace with being slaves to the corporate system, and spent their entire lives in soul-sucking jobs. I didn't want to be one of them. Even if that meant taking a leap of faith and risking everything. And just like that, my career was over. I made a promise to myself that I was going to find a way to quit my job. And that I was never going to let anyone disrespect me like that again. The only problem was, I had no clue where to start. I'm not going to lie. It was painful. I wish I could tell you that I was confident enough to quit my job that same day and leave the office with a bang like Jerry Maguire. But the truth is, I spent months jumping from one business to another. Or, should I say, from one failure to another. Shopify, eBay, Amazon, you name it. I would hear about a new business model that's been working for others. I'd try it and spend weeks working on it, only to fail miserably. For the first time in my life, I actually started to believe that I might not be good enough to succeed. Maybe Mr. Glickstein was right. Maybe I am as worthless as he thinks. But then one night, I saw an advertisement online. A guy named Kelly Felix was having a paid mastermind for successful business owners. And apparently, everyone who's making serious cash online was going to be there. Obviously, I wasn't nearly successful enough to be invited. And even if I was invited, I still couldn't afford the ticket. So I did something crazy. I figured out that the event was taking place at the Roosevelt Hotel in Hollywood. And I sneaked in. But that's not all. I hid in the back of the room until the event was over. I waited for Kelly to get off the stage. And I literally jumped him. I wasn't going to let him go until he told me how I could turn things around. So that's exactly what he did. And just like that, he introduced me to an unlikely methodology that was going to change my life forever.